In this video, I'm going to run through the top 5 most common questions that are asked in Chipotle interviews, and I'm going to help you plan brilliant answers that will get Chipotle interested in hiring you. So let's start with the question that comes up in every single Chipotle interview, and that is, what shifts can you do at Chipotle? And if you don't answer this question well, you are just not going to get the job. This is a real make or break interview question, so you've got to know how to answer it. So, some things you've got to mention and some things you've got to avoid. Firstly, you want to show that you have a can-do attitude. The way that people absolutely mess up this question is they instantly start listing all the times that they can't do. And that is the wrong way to approach it. You want to show off a can-do attitude. You want to show that you are flexible and that you can work around the business. They want people that are helpful, that when they need staff in on a particular day or a particular time, that you are going to be someone that they can rely on. So by saying as wide a range of times as possible and saying yes to as much as you can, your chances of getting the job go up massively. If you go in and start listing all the times that you can't work and explaining why the rest of your life is more important than working at Chipotle and how everything is a massive problem with you being able to work certain times, they're just going to be massively put off employing you. They don't want people with a can't-do attitude. They don't want people who are stubborn about certain times, and they don't want to see a lack of compromise. Why would you give a job to someone who is specifically said in their interview that I don't want to work these times? Because you're going to need people at those times, and they cannot rely on you, so they're going to employ someone else. The other great trick to be successful is to list specific times that they want to hear. Chipotle is very busy at certain times, particularly obviously meal times. So if you're happy to work those peak hours and you say that specifically, that's going to help their business out and they're going to be interested in that. School holidays are slightly more difficult to staff. If you're happy to work that time, mention it. If you don't want to work school holidays, don't mention it. Don't volunteer anything that is negative, because it's going to get you on that negative arrow of all the things they don't want to hear. Never volunteer information that's not going to help you in an interview by saying, I don't want to work school holidays. It's only going to be negative. Don't bring it up. If you're happy to work weekends, bring that up. Opening times is another busy and important time for the business. So say you're happy to work right at the very beginning of the day. And if you are super flexible, a great phrase to use is that I am happy to work to meet the business's needs. And if you say that, that's very reassuring to the manager. My real top tip to be successful is to say yes to as much as you can and don't bring up the times that you can't work. It's never going to help you out. So now that we've addressed this question, we're going to move on and do some study of a really important question, which is, what do you know about Chipotle? If you don't know a lot about the business, that is going to be a big problem. So I'm going to run through some facts that you have to know and learn about the business to be successful. But first, I want to give you an idea of how they think about scoring this question. So you obviously have to start with the things that are obvious, that everyone knows. Then you have to show off that you've done some good research, like watching this video. And then you have to show off some amazing knowledge, some things that only people who've really done their work would ever know. And if you do this, you're going to increase your chances of being successful. The further out in that diagram you go, the more successful you're going to be on this question, the better your knowledge is going to be. So let's run through the key things you've got to know about this business. So when you describe Chipotle, you should describe it as a fast casual brand. That is their position in the marketplace. They are, of course, a Mexican chain, and they focus on mission burritos, bowls, and tacos. Use the phrase mission burritos rather than just burritos, because that is a specific type of burrito that they specialize in. And if you're using the word mission, you're showing a little bit more knowledge than most people have. They were founded in 1993 by a man called Steve Ells. And you'll notice that there is no I in that name. A lot of people say Steve Ellis. That is incorrect. Make sure you get that one right. It was backed by a large investment and many investments by McDonald's. And at one point, McDonald's actually owned most of the business. They are strange in that currently all of their stores are corporate owned. They are not franchises. So if you're working for Chipotle, you're actually working for Chipotle. You're not working for someone who owns the franchise in a particular location. That is very unusual in the fast food marketplace, and it makes Chipotle stand out as very different. They have expanded internationally and are growing into other countries. They unusually offer a catering service. There's not very many fast food services that actually do catering for events. Chipotle is one of them. And another tip is do not mention the various outbreaks that they've had and the data hacks. That is not something that you should bring up in the interviews. My other top tip is that you should take the time to read the Chipotle Mexican Grill Form 10K. If you just put that into Google, that will give you the annual report of the company that they file with the stock market and will give you more information perfectly up to date than you would ever imagine. My other tip is to look up the history of Chipotle that was made by Bloomberg Business, and I will link that in the description. That's a really great thing to help you understand the history of the company and bring that up in your interview. So now that we've done this, we can move on and look at a really key question, which is why Chipotle? Why do you even want to work here? And this question is absolutely key to your success. Obviously, when you're applying for a job at Chipotle, you're going to have a compelling reason of why you want to actually work here. So some things you should really be thinking about is what is special about Chipotle? Why do you like Chipotle so much? And that's a very personal question. Think about, when you're planning your answer, what you like about the company and say it. Be really positive about them. Why would you like working in food service? Why do you actually want to work there? Do you enjoy working with food? Do you enjoy meeting new people? Do you enjoy serving customers? These are the sort of things you should be mentioning. There are progression opportunities. If you're applying for an entry-level job, you could work your way up to being a manager. The other interesting thing about Chipotle, as we said, is it's got lots of corporate stores. So even if you're applying at the management level, there is an opportunity to move up within corporate long term. That is a thing to mention. You should always, at various points in the interview, talk about the phrase food with integrity. That's their key brand promise. They care about their sourcing. They care about their ethics. And if you are mentioning that in your interview in a really positive way, as a reason why you've chosen Chipotle rather than the competitors, it's showing that you're a good fit for the company. And whatever you do, you must be enthusiastic when you're talking through these things. They would rather employ someone who's enthusiastic about Chipotle than someone who just sees it as an everyday normal job and doesn't really care. And the other thing you've got to be careful of is there's certain things that if you mention, you will not get the job. For example, if you say, why would you want to work for Chipotle? And you immediately go, it's very close to where I live. It's right next to my house. That's going to put them off massively. Don't talk about the idea that you're just looking to earn some money. You need to get money for this. They are going to be massively put off. They don't care. Everybody applying for the job wants to get money. They want to earn money. That's the point. Don't mention it. Do not give the impression that this is a short-term job, that you're going to be there 3 months and then go off and do something else, or that this is a job that you're taking so that you can get a better job later. It's going to come across quite insulting to the person interviewing you that probably did that job at one point. And it's going to basically say to them that if they hire you, they're going to have to find someone else 5 minutes later. Do not give the impression in an interview that you're about to leave the company that's going to hire you. That's always a disaster. And basically, anything that is irrelevant to Chipotle that doesn't show that you're a good employee is not going to get you the job. So some inspiration of things that you should be bringing up. Talk about your love for the brand. Do you eat at Chipotle regularly? Mention that. Show that you actually like the company, and that will go down very positively. Talk about their food for integrity. Show an alignment to the vision. If you're interested in progression, so moving into management, talk about how Chipotle provides those opportunities for hardworking people that are going to really invest in their careers. If you enjoy working with customers and you've got perhaps customer service experience, talk about really enjoying working with customers and how you've done that in the past successfully. And you can also learn lots of new skills working in any job, and you can mention that here as well. So that is how you answer the why Chipotle question. The next thing that they can ask about is what are your major strengths and weaknesses? And so we start by looking at the strengths question, and I'll give you some inspiration around some things you could talk about. You have to make sure that the strength that you talk about is actually a significant strength. It has to be something that really matters. You have to provide some evidence or some examples. Do you have any qualifications? Do you have any work experience? These are the sort of things that you have to back up your answers with. If you've got previous work experience, definitely get a reference from your previous manager that you can supply to Chipotle as evidence that your strength is real. It'll make it so much more powerful. The other thing, For a strength, it must really be important. It must make you a great Chipotle hire. This is your opportunity to say something that is going to help their business. So think carefully about the sort of skills that Chipotle are looking for. They are looking for people that are reliable. They're looking for people with great customer service skills that can provide great customer service. That is a real key. And so if you think of a great skill, I'm going to show you how you can structure your answer. So you want to start by saying a key strength that I have developed is, then say what your strength is. I can evidence this by, supply some evidence, like I said, some reference, some qualification, or if you don't have that, give an example of when you've used that strength. And then the last thing you've got to do is do the work for them. Actually explain to them why your strength matters. Don't assume that they're going to figure it out. Sell yourself. Show that at Chipotle, I'm going to use this strength. This will make your business better. Your store will be better because of my strength. And so some ideas of things you could talk about is you've got customer service experience. You're good at working with people. You could be reliable. You're friendly. You're nice. People want to be around you. You could also say that you're meticulous, that when you're preparing burritos, they're going to be done to a very high and exacting standard that meets customers' expectations. These are some ideas that you could use as strengths that really do matter to Chipotle's business. On the other hand, we now need to look at weaknesses, and weaknesses is a question that you can massively screw up. So you need to answer the biggest weakness question well, or else it's going to be a big problem. Weaknesses question, I tend to recommend a 3-step procedure. So start by not faking it. Don't come up with a fake, stupid weakness, like I'm a total perfectionist in everything I do. That is not a weakness. It goes across very badly and shows that you're not really thinking about your strengths and weaknesses and you're trying to just cheat your way through the question. Avoid it. The next thing you've got to do is when you talk about your weakness, and I'll give you some ideas of some reasonable weaknesses to include, make sure you say you're actually doing something about it. Don't just say it's a weakness and it's going to be a big problem. Actually solve that weakness. Show them that you're doing something to address it. And lastly, and most importantly, make sure it's something that Chipotle doesn't care about. That you pick your weakness in a way that isn't going to affect your performance at all. So for example, if you were to say, I have an offensive personality, well, why would they employ someone with an offensive personality? You're just going to say, I'm a massive problem. So don't say anything that's going to lose you any points, basically. And so when you pick your weakness, and I'll give you some inspiration in a second, the way you will structure your answer is to say a weakness that I'm aware of is, then say your weakness. Don't spend too long talking about your weakness. Spend the time talking about how you're actually working on it. I'm actively working to overcome this by. Are you going to take some classes online, for example? Are you going to sign up to something that's going to help you overcome this? Are you going to look to get some support and mentoring? Are you going to actually do something about your weakness? And so some ideas you could talk about is maths, because when you work at Chipotle, the till will probably do everything for you, so it doesn't really matter. Spelling, not a big problem if you're not going to be writing unless you're in management. One other weakness that most people in certain areas will have is that you can only speak English. Most applicants will have that, depending on where you're applying. If you're applying to somewhere with a large Spanish-speaking population, do not use this weakness. It's a good weakness in general for interviews, but be a little bit careful because it is a Mexican brand and it will have more Spanish-speaking customers. But if you only speak English, but you've taken some efforts to learn a second language, and you've made some progress in that, or you're going to do that and you plan on doing that, that can be a weakness that you can use because it's one that you could say that you're fixing. So there's some ideas on how you can get around the biggest weakness question. So let's move on to a very, very, very common interview question, which is where do you see yourself in 5 years? And again, we've got a 3-step process. It has to be credible. You're not going to pick something that is completely ridiculous, like you're going to be the chief executive of Chipotle in 5 years. That's not likely. Don't go there. It has to be well planned. You have to have actually thought about where you're going in 5 years. You don't want to give the idea that you don't really know or you've not really thought about it, because that's going to mark you right down. The other thing you've got to do is make sure it involves Chipotle. If it's not referencing Chipotle, it's a bad answer. So some things you could talk about is what is the journey to 1-up? And by that I mean, how do you get and earn, the key word being earn, one level higher than you are? So if you are applying for a position at an entry level, how would you get to assistant manager? If you're applying for assistant manager, how do you get to manager? Manager can move to area manager. So what is the journey to going up one level? If you're not interested in going up, that's absolutely fine. Talk about being really, really amazing at your current role. How are you going to be brilliant at your job? And perhaps if new people were coming into the company, you would be someone that would help train them because you've got such a good reputation. So building a reputation is a really key part of that 5-year journey. So after 5 years, you want to have a great reputation. The other thing you want to talk about is skill development. You're going to get really, really good at your job. You're going to get better at working with people. Before you even think about moving into any promoted post, you have to have built and developed your skills. On the other hand, there is a bad way to answer this. So anything that's absurd just reduces your credibility. They don't take you seriously. If you talk about moving fast, like ridiculously fast, so you're basically saying in 5 years' time, I'm going to be an area manager, and you're being interviewed by a manager, that's basically saying I'm better than you. So don't insult the interviewer by jumping above their job. The other thing you want to avoid is saying anything that has got zero interest in Chipotle's business. So talking about getting a completely different career is going to be a very, very bad idea. So if you say anything around getting out, leaving Chipotle, this is only a temporary job, that's not going to go down very well. There is no point hiring someone who's going to leave in a few months because then you have to hire someone else. And that takes time, effort, and money. They would rather hire people that they can have in and not have to constantly retrain people. They can have trained, dedicated staff that are there for the long run, and it saves a fortune for the business. So don't mention leaving. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. Your 5-year plan should involve Chipotle to be a strong answer. And before we finish, I want to leave you with a bonus, which is some great questions that you can ask. You must always ask about the next step. Show your interest and you actually care about what happens next, that you're eager to get the job and you can't wait to find out if you've been successful or not. If you're not successful, you should be looking at getting as much feedback as possible so that when you next go for an interview, you're going to do better. The other thing you should ask about is the team. Who are you working with? Show an interest in your colleagues. Ask them for advice about what you can do now to be extremely well prepared for starting at the company. The other clever question that you can ask is, how do you think about the perfect employee? What would you describe as your perfect employee? And by doing that, they're going to tell you some of the things that they're looking for, and you can engage in a conversation about how you meet exactly what they're looking for. And lastly, one of the questions you ask, you have to invent on the day. You have to be going through the interview, and if they say something that you're interested in or you wonder about, remember it, ask it at the end of the interview to show that you're really listening and engaging in a two-way conversation. And finally, I hope that you're successful in your Chipotle interview, and thank you very much for watching.